Other way.
Yeah. Dang, it's a good camera, man. You look good.
Well, it's a live remote. We're out here at Crawford Austin Properties, and I want to talk to you about last night's game.
All right, fine. All right.
So I listened to your show this morning, Locked on Baylor, of course. Cam is the best, and your breakdown was amazing.
The post game, you're saying, just the Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pete. I appreciate that.
No, it was really, really good. So I first of all, talk to me about what you think about the future of this team, because I believe the two freshmen playing outstanding last night really helps you going forward. Whereas I believe Omir and Nunn will eventually get with the program. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a fair assessment. I feel those two older guys have to get back with it. And for Nunn, it's been kind of a disappointing season the whole way through. Omir looked like Omir for most of this year. And the last couple of games, I genuinely thought he was sick or battling the flu or something. I was like, this guy just doesn't look right. And of course, last night he was really, really had a really tough game against BYU. But it's kind of a blessing in disguise, this short rotation that you've had, because it's made Rob Wright and VJ Edgecomb really step up. Now, I don't think Rob Wright needed any pushing towards, hey, we need you to be the guy. I think he was ready to take that on. But VJ Edgecomb has been a different player the last 4 games, finally being the alpha, aggressive, because I think it got to the point where us as Baylor fans were like, even if he is aggressive, like, can this kid score at a high volume? And, we see the athleticism and the talent. You're like, that's going to come at some point, but we might miss out on it in his year at Baylor. And that has certainly come around. Another fantastic game last night. And lo and behold, Pete, he's all of a sudden the best 3-point shooter on the team. Where did that come from? I was saying, like, kind of that same sentiment I just had. I was like, he's going to be a good 3-point shooter someday because everyone in the NBA is. Like, he's going to, but we might just miss out on this. And he goes 6 for 8 from 3 last night, and he keeps
in front
them
of
in the
32
game
scouts.
Yes. Oh, I mean, talk about a setting, right? I mean, I hate saying it when my team loses, but just an awesome game, perfect Big 12 atmosphere, 32 scouts there. The freshmen live up to it in terms of catchings for BYU and VJ for Baylor. Demon doesn't have a great game, but Rob Wright does. Rob Wright drags him back, like cojones dragging on the floor in the last 5 minutes of that game. No one else can hit free throws, but Rob Wright goes 8 for 8 from the line. At one point, he scores like 10 or 12 straight Baylor points to get them into overtime. It was just elite shot-making, playmaking, really good Big 12 basketball last night. And VJ was a huge part of that, and so was, of course, Cannon Catchings on the other side.
Nobody better to ask than you about this question. I want you to compare VJ Edgecomb to some of these amazing Baylor freshmen in years past.
The thing is, he's so much different from the rest of them in terms of, like, Keontae was a knockdown shooter, like just like NBA, was ready for the NBA out of high school, probably just his game in particular. Honestly, I think the closest comparison is he's kind of what we wanted Kendall Brown to be in 2022. Kendall Brown was obviously bigger guy. He was about 6'9". He wasn't a guard. He was more of a wing guy. And when he was at Sunrise Christian, which is another one of those elite prep schools, he was like a coast-to-coast ball handler, finish at the rim, explosiveness. And he just never showed that at Baylor. And that's what VJ still is, right? He's a decent enough ball handler that he can get through traffic, can take anyone off the dribble to the rim. Obviously, a terrific, emphatic finisher at the rim. And he's become a 3-point shooter as well. So I would say, in terms of just the overall level, it's he and Keontae are just on a different plane of what we've seen from other Baylor freshmen, but obviously in two very different ways. So I would put him right at the top 2 or 3 freshmen that Scott Drew has ever had, and therefore top 2 or 3 freshmen Baylor's ever had.
When you look at the games like this, first of all, I think let me backtrack a little bit. I think he's going to be the best pro out of Baylor in a very long time, maybe ever.
can agree with that.
Believe that. I think there's something about him that is just so special. And the shooting range and the fact that that's developing, like, why can he find a way to figure out a way to shoot threes, but Norchad can't? I mean, that's why is Norchad taking those threes late in the game?
Dude, see, this bugs the crap out of me because I know you've heard it from coaches, and you see it when you're in the game. It's not like his form is terrible, right?
No.
But the ball doesn't go in very much. Like, that's at the end of the day, it doesn't matter which form is if the ball doesn't go in. And yet, I'm watching last night. They're down 3, couple of possessions left, and he's pulling a 3. I'm like, what are we doing here?
And that is fool's gold. Like, the possibility that he has success with those threes prior to that is fool's gold. And I
You almost hate when they go in.
I talked to Scott Drew before that Cincinnati game, and he said we're going to get away from that. And now they're back to it again. And you could say they lost the game last night because of it.
I mean, honestly, no one player typically loses a game, but Norchad came pretty close. Like, I mean, he was killing him. He was killing him. The threes, the missed free throws, the silly fouls, ticky-tack, sure, but fouling guys 30, 35 feet from the basket. It was so infuriating for I think still such a good and obviously veteran player to go through that. It was a tough, man. It was tough.
I'm not quite sure what's going on here, but you can hear me, right?
Properties to build, man. Yeah, I got you.
Hey, this is a live remote, dude. This is not like some bank or some car dealership. This is a place where you get your hands dirty, Cam. Not that you know anything about that.
Sure, no.
I mean, you grew up what, like on the South Shore?
Yeah. Hey, I grew up. Hey, whoa, wait. I grew up in a blue-collar town. I'm not like Monaco. I didn't grow up in Cohasset, all right?
What did you think about Mike Monaco and King McClure last night? Let me actually whittle that question down. Monaco is always going to be good. Yeah. I thought King McClure was outstanding.
Can I say it's one of the best games I've heard King call? I'll say that. Like, I just thought he knew. I'll say it's the first time that I was like, wow, King knows the other team as well as he knows Baylor. Because he's always going to know Baylor very well. He played for the coach, right? Like, so he knows how that's going to go. And I thought he was giving just as good analysis for BYU and a new coach and Kevin Young and some of their players as he was about Baylor. And I thought he was critical of the refs when he needed to be. Like, he was, at one point he said, Monaco asked, is that a foul? And he goes, not in our league. It's not. Not in the Big 12.
I thought that was great analysis.
That's
and then
good.
Monaco asked him, when you put Norchad back in, and he said under 4 minutes, like right away. Yeah. I was like, damn, King's dialed in.
Yes, that was the other one I was going to bring up. Like that's the kind of stuff that I like to hear as someone who I think that's good for the casual fan, and that's good for guys like us who watch all the time, because every coach can be a little bit different about that, and good on Monaco for teeing it up.
I texted you, like, joking around, like, I hate Mike Monaco. He's so good, and I learned from watching him. I'm like, man, that's something I can use. That's another thing I can use. Like the fact that I thought he maybe referenced a little too much the Jonathan Gavoni rankings of like players. I thought he got caught up in that, but I mean, otherwise, that's an A+ broadcaster.
Oh, dude, Monaco's really good, man. And you know how tough I am on play-by-play guys. To me, they're a dime a dozen. But Monaco is really good without having to be super flashy, and like that's how you get to be like a Jim Nantz, right? Like that's how you get to be that. I don't think anyone would accuse Nantz of being right. Yeah, Nantz is not a bit guy. You know what I mean? And he's not like the Hornets guy who just screams all the time.
Eric Collins.
Eric Collins, man. No, Monaco's really good. I like when he's doing our games. He doesn't do a lot. He doesn't do a ton.
No, he does mostly ACC. I think King did a good job too. Last night he was like, "Welcome to the ACC, Mike," or Big 12. Cam, that was like you mentioned something on Locked On Baylor about scheduled losses. Can you elaborate a little bit about that? What that means and how that's impacting Baylor this year?
I'd love to. Let's see if we can whittle this thing down, to use a Pete Souza term. So when Baylor was at its peak, right, 2020. 1920 through 21-22, they were one of the elite teams in America, obviously, with a national championship in there. And they didn't lose a lot of games, and they didn't make a lot of excuses. And it feels like since then, we have regressed to where we were before 2020, even with the same amount of talent that those teams had. And that is, last night, for example, it's your second game on the road. It's a really tough road atmosphere. You're playing at altitude, and BYU needs a win. Like, all of those things are just excuses for you not to win. And they used to not buy into that. And, I can think of games where they were shorthanded and they were on the road. Like 2020, they had never, ever won at Allen Fieldhouse. And that was a really good Baylor team, but KU was ranked higher. And they had a 12-0 run to end the game at Allen. That never happens. And they worked Kansas in that game. They won by like 8 points. And so that's when I was like, that should have been a loss. That was a scheduled loss. You never win at Allen Fieldhouse, and no one is going to, everyone's going to be like, oh, well, it's Kansas. No one wins at Kansas, right? Last night, same thing. Most fans are going to be like, oh, well, Baylor was shorthanded. And, BYU, man, what an atmosphere. It's like, well, you were shorthanded the 2 games before that. And we didn't make these out to be miraculous wins over Utah and Kansas State. And I thought you were better, significantly better than Utah and Kansas State. I thought they were a better team than BYU. And I thought they had plenty of chances to win the game. And still, it was like their defense didn't make adjustments quick enough. It took them too long to kind of drag their nuts on the floor offensively, the way I put it. Norchad never came around to getting his head out of his butt in that game. And so it was like, it's just one that it's one that you look forward at and you're going to look back at as, oh, well, what are you going to do? We talked about it with the Arizona swing a couple weeks ago of, hey, you're going on the road for 2, Arizona State, Arizona. You're lucky. You're happy with the split there. And then you beat Arizona State, and it's like, well, here comes the split. Same thing with this. It was like, I was looking at it last week. You got 3 winnable games in a row. You'd be happy if you win 2 out of 3, but you really should probably win all 3. You win the first 2. Here it comes. Like, I'm just, as a fan, that to me is the difference from really good teams, which is what Baylor's had since 2022. That's the year after the championship, and elite teams, which is what they had those 3 years. And they have the talent, and I think the coach, right, to be an elite team. And when you keep losing these scheduled losses like this, you're not an elite team. And right now they're battling to be a good team because if they just keep filing in with these excuses and losing the scheduled losses, then they're going to really be scratching and clawing for the NCAA tournament. So the game this weekend.
That's my question. What would seed this team right now, today?
All the bracketology has them at 9, 8 or 9. That's as good as I'd give them right now. And honestly, the reason why they're there is because their best win is St. John's. And St. John's kind of faltered a little bit after that Baylor loss, but they're red hot right now. They're having as good a start in Big East play as they've had since they made the Final Four with Chris Mullin.
Like lately, he needs a haircut.
Yeah,
he didn't look great. He didn't look great last night.
Rick, let himself go, man. So that was a win, Pete. That was 2.5 months ago.
Yeah.
And you're living off that in the best conference in college basketball. You've got to start stringing these wins together. So I've got them as like a 9 right now. They're playing like a 9 seed. And you don't get much lower than that as a Power 4 team. You don't get lower than 11, and that's a play-in.
I got one for you. They're going to win Saturday because KJ Adams might be out and DeJuan Harris might be out.
Yeah.
So that's a game that you got to seize that opportunity because at the end of the year, people are going to look at that win and they're still going to see Kansas.
If those two are out, you have to win that game. And agreed. I will say the only thing that I thought Norchad did well at any point last night was he did have some good defensive stands. And if he is the competitor that we think he is, then he is going to be pissed off going into this game Saturday. And Hunter Dickinson is a guy you can get at. Like, Dickinson is a guy who I do think he's overrated. I'll say that. But he's one of those where he's dominant for like 12 minutes and he'll go missing for 15. And Norchad could really take advantage of that. But if those two guys are out on Saturday for KU, you've got to win that game. You have to.
I got one more for you.
Yeah.
So this morning I stopped at 7-Eleven and I was like, I'm going to get a newspaper. I've always wanted to get the newspaper to look through it before I did the show. I think that's like a super cool way to get ready. The Dallas
Very
Morning
radio,
News, Wednesday edition. I want you to guess how much it cost.
Wednesday edition. $4.50.
$4.99.
That's ridiculous.
What the?
$4.99.
What's going on? I mean, like, is that because we're in Waco?
I mean, maybe. You could buy a couple of coffees for that.
$4.99. Who's reading the paper at $4.99 a clip?
Yeah, I would notice that when I would go like after a big Baylor win, and I'd get the trib to have like when they win the national championship or something, and I'd be like, man, $3.50. Like, really? I'm in Waco. Like, what are we doing? And so, damn, $4.99.
Wow.
And you wonder why this industry, and that's about as much as it costs to read an article online, by the way.
It's at the end of the day, yeah. Which you're going to be paying for till you die.
Yes. These local papers. I'm like, seriously? Nothing is not behind the paywall? Like, ugh.
Last question.
I sympathize with the struggle, but I guess I don't know it. Yeah.
Last question for you, and I'm previewing tomorrow's show. We got Fran Fraschilla coming on, and he was supposed to be today, so you're in for Fran.
Ask Fran about the Dwayne Wade comparison with VJ.
Okay.
Because he did that preseason, and I have bought full hook, line, and sinker the last few games of the Dwayne Wade comparison. Yeah.
Okay, I can't wait to ask him what he would compare the Big 12 and the pageantry and the excitement and the amazing basketball we've seen. The last 3 games I've watched, outside of the one I called Saturday, so I'm talking viewing, I watched Houston and Kansas on Saturday. I watched Arizona, Iowa State on Monday night, and then I watched that Baylor overtime game. Like, these were 3 bonanza, like game of the year type atmospheres and results. What are your thoughts on the Big 12 right now and how excellent it is?
It's still great, man. It's still great. The reports of their demise were premature. I'll say that. Honestly, I compare it to the Big Ten in football, right? Because everyone talks about the SEC, and I don't know, the Big Ten too. And like the Big Ten's won the last 2 national championships, right? Like the Big 12 had its run of putting teams in the Final Four every year. And yet, even with the Big Ten doing what they're doing in football, you're still talking about the SEC. So look, you can talk about the SEC in basketball all you want this year. It's very good. Very good. But this is still the best for the college basketball fan more than anything. I mean, great coaches, elite talent. And I know it's been 2 years. You're going to have a Big 12 team in the Final Four this year. I really sincerely believe that. I think Kansas, when they're fully healthy, could get there. I still buy stock in Houston and Iowa State, despite their March Madness performances. And honestly, people are talking about Grant McCaslin's Texas Tech as a sleeper to make a big run in the NCAA tournament. All the guy does is win. He never gets the hype, and all he does is win. And Baylor's going to match up with them next week. Tech's going to be in the rankings. I don't think Baylor's going to be. That's a danger team as well. I love Iowa State, though. I really think
you're dangerous. And I love that about you. Cam Stewart, you can catch him coming up after this show, the Cam Show on the Rogue Media Network. You can also catch him on Locked On Baylor. Excellent work there. Cam, appreciate you spending the time today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Pete. Always a pleasure.
All right, we'll see Cam next time. We will see you after this break.